Chancellor George Osborne has said Conservative plans to remove family homes worth up to £1 million from inheritance tax supports the basic human instinct to provide for your children. It means more owners of homes in the UK would be able to pass them on to their children without paying tax. The policy is likely to be at the centre of the Tory election manifesto, which will be launched next week. Labour said the Tories had promised such a move before and did not deliver. Deputy Leader Harriet Harman contrasted the idea with Labour's plan for a mansion tax, saying people face a big choice. It's becoming clearer and clearer as we get to the election how actually the Tories are helping a few people, and we want everybody to be better off, she told BBC One's Andrew Marr show. The £1bn cost of the Conservative policy will be paid for by reducing tax relief on the pension contributions of people earning more than £150,000, says the party. In other election news, Labour has been setting out plans to raise an extra £7.5bn a year through closing tax loopholes and imposing bigger fines on tax avoiders. Labour has also announced proposals to give victims of sexual offences the right to challenge decisions by police not to prosecute suspects. The Lib Dems are to set out their plans to eliminate the deficit by 2017/18, through raising taxes by an additional £12bn, cutting public spending by £12bn and cutting welfare by £3bn. The latest BBC poll of polls has Labour on 34%, the Conservatives on 33%, UKIP on 14%, the Lib Dems on 8% and the Greens on 5%. UKIP leader Nigel Farage told the BBC his party would scrap inheritance tax and says details of how it would be financed would be unveiled in its manifesto on Thursday. At present, inheritance tax is payable at 40% on the value of an estate in excess of the tax-free allowance of £325,000 per person. Married couples and civil partners can pass the allowance on to each other. If the Conservatives win the general election on May 7, parents will each be offered a further £175,000 family home allowance to enable them to pass property on to children tax-free after their death. The new family home allowance can be added to the existing £325,000 inheritance tax threshold. The total will be transferable on the death of one spouse and added to the other spouse's allowance, to bring the tax-free total up to £1 million. The full amount would be transferable even if one member of a married couple has died before the policy comes into effect, the Conservatives say, and so would benefit existing widows and widowers. For properties worth more than £2 million, the new allowance would be gradually reduced so that those with homes worth more than £2.35 million would not benefit at all. The new allowance would come into effect in April 2017 and be available to married couples and civil partners, even if one of them has died before that date. Mr. Osborne told BBC One's Andrew Marr show, Conservatives support the basic human instinct to provide for your children. And we believe that your home that you've worked for and you've saved for should belong to you and your family, not the tax man. So we will take family homes out of inheritance tax, we will effectively increase the inheritance tax threshold to £1 million, so that only millionaires pay inheritance tax. It was a message repeated in a speech by Mr. Cameron, who said, you should be able to pass it, your home, on to your children. And with the Conservatives, the tax man will not get his hands on it. But Shadow Treasury Secretary Chris Leslie, for Labour, said the policy was the latest panicky promise from the Conservatives. He said, the Tories made a promise on inheritance tax before the last election and they broke it. At a time when our NHS is in crisis and most working people are paying more under the Tories, it cannot be a priority to spend £1bn on a policy which the Treasury says would not apply to 90% of estates. Liberal Democrat Chief Secretary to the Treasury Danny Alexander said the Conservatives had the wrong priorities. He added, it is extraordinary that the Tories will go into great detail on a policy that will cut tax for a small number of estates, but steadfastly refuse to give any detail at all on the massive cuts to public services that they desire. However, when asked whether the Lib Dems would block the proposals if they ended up back in coalition, he declined to say he would, instead saying, I'm saying I strongly disagree with it. Our priority is further increases in the income tax personal allowance. We've stopped things in this parliament including cuts to inheritance tax for millionaires. Paul Johnson from the Institute for Fiscal Studies told the BBC that owner-occupied housing is extremely tax-privileged already, adding that the policy did not address the lack of housing and could drive house prices up in the long run. And he claimed that the policy, coupled with the reduction in pension tax relief for the highest earners, could have a damaging effect on work incentives by taking from high earners and giving to those living off the unearned incomes left to them by their parents.